So U.S. military leaders are telling troops that the Iran war is part of God's divine plan and that President Donald Trump is blessed by God to carry out that plan. So let's talk about it. If this is the first time you're seeing me, hi, I'm Rev Carla. I'm a former Christian and minister to the unchurched. I help people deconstruct, heal from Christian patriarchy, and reclaim their spirituality after leaving church. I am the author of Deconstructing. You can find it where books are sold, and you can get a signed copy in the TikTok shop. When a commander stands in a combat readiness briefing and invokes the book of Revelation, telling troops that a sitting president has been anointed by Jesus to ignite Armageddon, that is not simply a comment that reflects Christian theology. That is emotional and psychological manipulation. Now let's get some context for this one. The Military Religious Freedom Foundation is a 501c3 watchdog organization dedicated to ensuring that all members of the United States Armed Forces fully receive their constitutional guarantees of religious freedom. This foundation has recently been inundated with reports from soldiers being called into Bible study by leaders to assure those soldiers that they don't need to worry about this war. It's all going to go as God has planned. Now, there's so many issues with this, but first of all, soldiers are trained to follow orders. They are conditioned to respect hierarchy. When theology is introduced at the command level, it creates a pressure system in which disagreement can be implied to be disloyal to your commander and a disrespect to his beliefs. Imagine if you were an atheist or even agnostic, or you have some other religious belief, or if you're even a Christian who does not share that same specific end times theology. Can you imagine sitting in that room? The oath you swore was to the Constitution, yet the message being delivered suggests that participating in military action is participation in divine prophecy. The tension that this creates is profound, and it's also unconstitutional. Refusing a Bible study invitation from a peer is one thing, but sitting under a commander who frames war as God's plan is something entirely different. That power dynamic makes dissent very costly. Now, for more context, the version of Revelation that's being cited in these so-called briefings that are really Bible studies, this traces back to John Nelson Darby. In the 19th century, Darby revised what Revelation was actually about. And don't miss that point alone, that the apparent, inerrant, infallible Word of God that is never changing got a facelift by a man who had been thrown from his horse, hit his head on a doorpost, then got this revelation about the book of Revelation. Anyway, Darby said that Revelation predicts specific future wars involving real modern countries. And since that time, everyone has been predicting end times as being laid out by the symbolic interpretation in Revelation. That interpretation spread through American churches and eventually merged with, you guessed it, Christian nationalism. And now today, so many believers began to see global conflict as part of God's timeline. Generations of American Christians absorbed this apocalyptic teaching and now view every event in the world through that framework. This belief has shaped American foreign policy influence for decades. And when that theology migrates from pulpits into Pentagon briefings, it changes how war is imagined. If conflict is framed as divinely ordained and prophetically necessary, then you understand why a general will literally grin when he says to the soldiers, quote, President Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran, to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth. End quote. That's not me adding hyperbole to this. A grinning general saying Trump is anointed by Jesus is in a letter from a soldier to the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. This teaching would see any de-escalation as appearing to interfere with God's plan. Even Christians inside that room may feel trapped if their faith does not align with end times theology. Now let's be clear. This is not hostility towards Christianity. It is resistance to coercive theology imposed through military leadership. This moment also exposes something many deconstructing Christians already know. The end times narrative many of us were raised on was never universal Christian doctrine. It was a relatively recent interpretive system that merged apocalyptic imagination with Christian patriarchy. Seeing its surface in national defense policy is concerning because it reveals how deeply that system has embedded itself in American power structures. There is a difference between a soldier having private faith and a commander framing military action as fulfillment of biblical prophecy. One is protected under religious liberty. The other pressures subordinates in ways that test constitutional boundaries and personal conscience. For those who grew up under this theology, you know what this theology feels like. We were taught to see wars in the Middle East as signs. We were taught to scan headlines for revelation imagery. The core issue is not whether someone believes in Jesus. It is whether state power is being interpreted through a specific 19th century apocalyptic lens and then imposed within a military hierarchy. That is where the constitutional oath becomes compromised. Because if soldiers are told that war fulfills divine prophecy, how safe are our soldiers if those commanders believe that wars are divinely ordered? It is not a far leap to fear that their safety would be compromised if those in leadership can rationalize their deaths as God's will. Now, if you're deconstructing, want to heal from Christian patriarchy, reclaim your spirituality after leaving church, and go deeper into these conversations, be sure to follow the arrows and hit subscribe so you're notified when my latest teachings and study groups are available.